Man, these games didn't fail because they were bad. They failed financially, while overpriced, empty, generic games were selling like crazy. Bad marketing, clueless executives, and disastrous launches buried incredible works. Today, I'm going to show you games that lost money, but absolutely embarrass a lot of what's released today at full price. The Order 1886. Let's kick things off with a game that was absolutely crucified when it launched, The Order 1886. I remember the drama like it was yesterday. Everyone was complaining about the length. But dude, looking back in 2026, this game is a technical marvel. The transition between cutscenes and gameplay is so seamless, it still puts most PS5 titles to shame. You're Galahad, an elite knight in a steampunk London fighting werewolves, and the atmosphere is just heavy. It's thick with fog, grit, and some of the coolest weapon designs I've ever seen. That thermite rifle? Absolute fire. The real tragedy here is that we never got a sequel. The gunplay felt weighty and impactful, and the world building was so deep that I found myself reading every newspaper and inspecting every item just to stay in that world a little longer. People called it a tech demo, but I call it a focused cinematic masterpiece. It didn't have a 100-hour map filled with boring fetch quests, it had a vision. If you want to see what cinematic truly means without all the modern bloat, you need to pick this up for a few bucks. It's a short ride, but man, it's a gorgeous one. Quantum Break. Next up is Quantum Break, and honestly, it breaks my heart that this game didn't start a massive franchise. Remedy Entertainment really swung for the fences here by trying to bridge the gap between a high-octane shooter and a live-action TV show. I remember the first time I used Jack Joyce's time stutter powers, seeing the world literally shatter into crystalline shards while everything else stayed frozen was a total holy crap moment. It's visually stunning, and the physics-based destruction during those time glitches is way ahead of anything we're seeing in generic shooters today. The flop happened because people weren't ready for the TV show integration, but if you actually sit through it, the story is a top-tier sci-fi thriller with some incredible performances. The combat is where the game really shines. Once you master the time blink and the time shield, you feel like a literal god on the battlefield. It encourages you to be aggressive and creative, not just hide behind a crate. It's got a soul, a bold vision, and a plot that actually respects your intelligence. It's a smart, stylish experience that was just too ambitious for its own good at the time. Titanfall 2. I will say it until I'm blue in the face. Titanfall 2 is the most disrespected masterpiece in gaming history. EA literally sent this game out to die by launching it right between Battlefield and Call of Duty. Talk about a suicide mission. But man, the second you start wall running and sliding, you realize that every other FPS feels like it's stuck in the mud. The movement is pure gameplay crack. And then there's BT7274. I didn't expect to get emotional over a giant robot, but his dry, literal humor and the bond you build with him is the heart of the game. The level design is just one mic drop moment after another. That mission, Effect and Cause, where you're switching between two different timelines in real time, I've never seen anything like it since. It's a masterclass in pacing. No filler, just pure creative genius from start to finish. The multiplayer was also light years ahead of its time, but even if you just play it for the 6-hour campaign, it's worth 10 times what you'll pay for it now. It's a perfect game that was buried by corporate incompetence, and it puts modern, recycled shooters to shame. Binary Domain. Now here's a deep cut that most people totally missed. Binary Domain. This came from the team behind Yakuza, and it's basically Terminator meets iRobot, with some of the best squad mechanics I've ever played. The consequence system was way ahead of its time. How you talked to your teammates and how you performed in battle actually changed how much they trusted you, which affected the story. I remember shouting voice commands into my mic, which was a bit janky, I'll admit, but when it worked, it felt like I was actually leading a squad of soldiers through a futuristic Tokyo. The real star, though, is the procedural damage on the robots. You don't just shoot until the health bar is empty. You blast off their armor, rip their legs off, and watch them crawl toward you, or shoot their heads off to make them attack their own friends. It's incredibly satisfying and tactical. The story also gets surprisingly deep, asking some really heavy questions about what it means to be human. It's a gritty, creative, and polished third-person shooter that deserved to be a massive hit. If you love a good sci-fi story with some unique gameplay hooks, you've gotta find a copy of this. Ryse, Son of Rome. Man, Ryse got such a bad rap at launch. People called it a button masher and moved on, but they completely missed the point. This game is a front row seat to a Roman war epic. I remember the first time I landed on the beaches of Britannia. The arrows whistling past my head, the mud splashing on my armor. It felt like playing through the opening of Saving Private Ryan, but with gladius swords. The visuals are still jaw-dropping today. The facial animations alone are better than some next-gen games coming out right now. The combat is all about that visceral, heavy rhythm. When you time a parry just right and go into an execution, you actually feel the weight of the steel. It's cinematic as hell. I loved the segments where you command your legion to form a testudo, the shield wall, to advance against archers. It made me feel like a true commander, not just a soldier. It's a tight, focused, 7-hour adrenaline shot that doesn't waste your time with 50 hours of filler. It's a crime we never got a sequel exploring more of the Empire. If you want a game that makes you feel like a total badass in sandals, this is your pick. Prey, talk about a marketing disaster. Because of the name, everyone expected a sequel to the 2006 game, but what Arcane gave us was something way more sophisticated. Prey is a masterpiece of the immersive sim genre. I remember waking up in that apartment on Talos 1 and having my mind completely blown by the first big twist. It's a game of paranoia. Those mimics that can turn into any object in the room had me hitting coffee mugs with a wrench for hours. It's that constant tension that makes the atmosphere so thick you can almost taste it. The freedom here is what puts modern games to shame. You aren't just following a quest marker, you're using a glue cannon to build your own stairs, or turning into a piece of trash to squeeze through a tiny gap. It respects your intelligence. Every room is a puzzle, and every terminal you read adds a layer to a haunting sci-fi mystery. It flopped because people didn't know what it was, but for those of us who played it, it's one of the smartest, creepiest, and most rewarding experiences in gaming. It's basically BioShock in space, and it deserves way more love than it got. Mad Max. I will never understand how Mad Max didn't become a massive hit. It launched on the exact same day as Metal Gear Solid 5, which was basically a death sentence. But dude, this is the best car combat game ever made. Building your magnum opus from a scrap heap into a spiked, flame-throwing beast of the wasteland is so satisfying. I've spent literal hours just driving into a massive sandstorm, watching the lightning strike and the debris fly while I'm trying to harpoon a warboy's car door off. The atmosphere is just dusty, brutal, and beautiful. The hand-to-hand combat is that Arkham-style flow, but way more dirty and violent. Every punch feels like it's breaking a bone. But it's the sense of scale that got me. Seeing a giant industrial base in the distance and knowing you have to dismantle it piece by piece. It captures the soul of the movies perfectly without just being a movie game. It's a gritty, lonely, and incredibly polished open world that actually feels like a wasteland, not just a map full of icons. If you like engines, explosions, and a world that wants to kill you, you've gotta play this.
Command from outside the storm wall.
Spec Ops: The Line. Alright, let's talk about a game that basically pulled a Trojan horse on the entire industry. On the surface, Spec Ops: The Line looks like your generic bro-dude military shooter set in Dubai. But man, once you get a few hours in, it turns into a psychological nightmare that questions why you even play violent games in the first place. I remember the white phosphorus scene. It's a moment that stayed with me for weeks. It's not about being a hero, it's about the horrific reality of war and the mental toll it takes on a person. The gameplay is standard third-person cover shooting, but the story is a 10 out of 10 masterpiece inspired by Heart of Darkness. The way the environment changes, Dubai being buried in sand, and the way the protagonist, Captain Walker, physically and mentally deteriorates throughout the game is incredible detail. His voice lines go from calm tactical orders to screaming, unhinged rants. It flopped because people thought it was just another shooter, but it's actually a brilliant, dark critique of the genre. It's uncomfortable, it's provocative, and it's something every gamer needs to experience at least once. Man, I am still obsessed with the art style of this game. Back in 2008, everyone was obsessed with gritty and brown graphics, but Prince of Persia went for this gorgeous, painterly, cel-shaded look that honestly still looks better than most modern titles today. It's like playing through a living watercolor painting. I remember the flow of the parkour. It was so rhythmic and meditative. People complained that you couldn't die because Alika would always save you, but I actually loved that. It kept the momentum going and felt more like a graceful dance through these ancient, corrupted lands. The relationship between the prince and Alika is the heart of the journey. The banter between them feels natural, and watching the world heal as you cleanse the corruption is incredibly satisfying. It was a bold reimagining of the franchise that unfortunately got cut short because it didn't hit those massive sales targets. But looking back, it's such a relaxing, beautiful, and unique experience. It didn't need 1,000 icons on a map, it just needed a great vibe and a sense of wonder. If you want something that feels like a fairy tale brought to life, you have to track this one down.
Castlevania Lords of Shadow. Okay, I'm gonna be controversial. I actually think Lords of Shadow is one of the best 3D action games ever made. It's basically God of War, but with a gothic, tragic soul. You play as Gabriel Belmont, voiced by Robert Carlyle, and the story is this epic, heart-wrenching descent into darkness. The scale of the bosses is just insane. I still remember fighting these massive titans that made me feel like an ant. The environment design, from the snowy forests to the crumbling castles, is some of the most atmospheric work Mercury Steam has ever done. What I really loved was the combat system. Switching between light magic to heal and shadow magic to deal damage added a tactical layer that a lot of hack and slash games miss. It wasn't just button mashing, it was about managing your resources while dodging a giant werewolf. The ending? Man, I won't spoil it, but it's one of the biggest holy crap moments in gaming history. It flopped because hardcore Metroidvania fans didn't like the 3D shift, but as a cinematic action-adventure, it's a masterpiece that puts many modern linear games to shame. It's dark, it's poetic, and it's absolutely epic.
Alpha Protocol. This is the definition of a diamond in the rough. Alpha Protocol was buggy as hell at launch, and it got shredded by critics. But if you look past the jank, it has the best choice and consequence system I've ever seen, period. You play as a secret agent named Michael Thornton, and every single thing you say, your tone, your attitude, who you kill, who you spare, radically changes the story. I remember being shocked that a minor conversation in the first hour could completely change a boss fight 10 hours later. It makes modern choice-based games feel like child's play. The timed dialogue system keeps you on your toes. You don't have 10 minutes to think. You have to react. Do you play it cool like Bond, professional like Bourne, or unhinged like Jack Bauer? The game actually tracks those styles. The stealth and shooting are definitely a bit clunky, I'll admit that, but the RPG depth and the branching narrative are light years ahead of their time. It's a spy thriller where you actually feel like you're pulling the strings of a global conspiracy. It's a cult classic for a reason, and if you can handle a little 2010 jank, the story will absolutely hook you. Enslaved Odyssey to the West. Finally, we have Enslaved. This game was written by Alex Garland, the guy who did Ex Machina, and starred Andy Serkis, so you know the acting and the story are top tier. It's a post-apocalyptic world, but instead of being gray and depressing, it's lush, green, and beautiful because nature has reclaimed the cities. The chemistry between Monkey and Trip is some of the best character writing I've ever experienced. You start as a prisoner and end up in this deeply emotional partnership that feels totally earned. The platforming is fun and cinematic, and the combat has this heavy feel that makes every swing of Monkey's staff feel powerful. But the real reason this game is better than most modern stuff is the heart. It's a focused, emotional journey that doesn't waste your time with open-world bloat. It tells a human story in a mechanical world, and the ending is something I still think about years later. It flopped because of bad marketing and being a new IP, but it's a beautiful, polished adventure that every gamer should play at least once. It's a hidden gem in the truest sense of the word. Alien Isolation? Man, Alien Isolation is probably the most stressful game I have ever played. And I mean that as a huge compliment. It flopped because people expected another generic shooter like Colonial Marines. But what Creative Assembly gave us was a terrifying game of hide and seek with the smartest AI in history. I remember crouching under a desk on the Sevastopol, holding my breath in real life, hearing the heavy thud of the xenomorph's footsteps above me. You can't just kill it, you have to outsmart it. It's pure distilled dread. The lo-fi sci-fi aesthetic is just perfect. It looks exactly like the 1979 movie, with chunky buttons and flickering CRT monitors. Modern horror games often rely on cheap jump scares, but Isolation builds this slow, suffocating tension that never lets up. The way the alien learns your patterns, if you hide in lockers too much, it starts checking them, is genius. It's a 10 out of 10 love letter to the franchise that was misunderstood at launch. If you want a game that actually makes you feel hunted, you need to test your nerves with this one. Sleeping Dogs. I've said it before and I'll say it again. It is a literal crime that Sleeping Dogs didn't sell enough to get a sequel. It was stuck in development hell for years, but what came out was better than almost any GTA clone. You're Wei Shen, an undercover cop in Hong Kong, and the story is a brutal, emotional journey about loyalty and identity. What hooks me every time is the combat. It's not about guns, it's about crunching martial arts. Shoving a guy into a phone booth or using a meat hook to end a fight is just visceral in a way modern games are too safe to try. Hong Kong feels so much more alive than most massive, empty maps today. The night markets, the rain-slicked streets, the neon signs, it's got an incredible vibe. I spent way too much time betting on cockfights and singing karaoke. It's a game with a massive soul and a protagonist you actually care about. It flopped financially, but in terms of quality, it puts most modern open-world live service games to absolute shame. It's a masterpiece of atmosphere and bone-breaking action. Finally, we have Sunset Overdrive. This was Insomniac Games before they did Spider-Man, and you can see that DNA everywhere. It's bright, it's loud, it's hilarious, and it's basically Tony Hawk with guns. The movement is the hook. You have to grind on rails, bounce off cars, and wall run to keep your style meter up while blasting mutants with a gun that shoots TNT-strapped teddy bears. I remember the first time the movement clicked for me, and I realized I hadn't touched the ground in 10 minutes. It's pure, unadulterated joy. The humor is very meta. It constantly breaks the fourth wall and pokes fun at gaming tropes. It's the exact opposite of the gritty and serious games we see so much of today. It's a game that just wants you to have a blast and look cool doing it. It flopped because it was an Xbox exclusive at a time when the console was struggling, but it's one of the most creative and energetic games I've ever played. If you're tired of boring, realistic shooters, Sunset Overdrive is the neon-colored shot of adrenaline you need. And that's the list, guys. 15 games that failed in the eyes of the accountants, but won the hearts of anyone who actually played them. These are the titles that took risks, tried something new, and showed us that there's more to gaming than just sales figures and marketing hype. But I want to hear from you. Which flop is a 10 out of 10 in your book? Is there a game you love that everyone else seems to have ignored? Let's talk about it in the comments. I love finding new hidden gems.